up in Michigan. I will be, I'll keep on having to click admit every once in a while for everyone. But thank you all for coming. I wanted to share what I had learned here in building fiber to the home here in Michigan. Let me go and share some slides that I had put together and put everybody here into the infinite sharing vortex for a moment. Uh-oh. And let's see if I can hit the right buttons. Maybe not. So I wanted to share with you, what I've done here for budgeting for a fiber build. I'm assuming everybody can see it. If not, you can unmute and yell at me or something. So background. Yes, I'm that guy from the Ars article that you saw, a week or two ago. I'm located here in Michigan, in the U.S. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how things work in your state, but really this is an attempt to share what I've learned. If I know what I'm doing, I'll try and, like I said, I'll try and record and post this. There's the links I'm going to have available. And apparently this may not work well if I have to keep hitting admit on everyone. All right. So we'll try this. Hopefully this is sharing okay for everyone. And this will work. Or maybe not.
We can see it, Jared. We're good.
Okay. And when I flip back and forth, I assume you're seeing me flip back and forth between my tabs.
No, I just see the budgeting for a build right now, the Google Slides.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I just wanted to share, hey, how, everybody always wants to know how much does it cost? And I want to say I went into this thinking I was going to build fiber for about 50 grand a mile, all in, and I thought that was gonna be the case. I've since found out that, for aerial, for example, you're looking at sort of $25,000 to $36,000 a mile. For underground, you're looking at, $60,000 a mile or up. Expect a lot of variables based on your soil conditions, and stuff. But I want to talk a little bit about a project that I'm building here in the next couple months, and just kind of share what I'm doing. And talk about also what the resources I use. So I spend a lot of time with Google Earth, and then our county actually has an online mapping thing. It's a public website, and it's entirely possible your area has something like that too, where they share the maps, including where the rights of way are and stuff like that. It's got a bunch of different overlays that you can turn on. So this is a map of a project that I'm going to do here in this spring. This is connecting another 20 or so homes into the network.
Jared, we are still on the cover slide.
You still are? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Let me figure out how to do this. So it is only showing that first slide. Thank you for telling me. Let me see if I can get this maybe this thing to undock or something. All right, let's try this again. All right, are you seeing an image now?
Yes, it looks like it's launching, and I'm seeing a map now.
Okay.
I think we're good.
Perfect. Yeah. All right, excellent. Yeah, so this is, so this area that has the green border and is colored in green is the area that I already have live on my network. And then this is an expansion. This is about a little bit over a 2-mile expansion of my network that I'm planning on doing here. In this case, I actually happen to have a wealthy individual who decided that they wanted me to build this network and extend it to them. And so they basically put up the majority of the money for the build in order to get out into this area. which is nice. It certainly helps with the financial viability of it. And one of the things I want to highlight on that is don't be afraid to ask people for lots of money, realistically, because there's a lot of costs associated with doing a project like this. And when you have a project like this, I think it's very easy to feel sheepish asking people for, $5,000 or 10 grand or, even 100 grand to build service. You may find that the person values it at that amount. And that's one of the things to keep in mind is somebody may be willing to actually spend that type of money to get the service built to them. So let me show you the county actually has this nice website, like I said, where it actually shows all the property and parcel shapes. So I can look at that route in Google Earth and I see what it looks like there, but I can actually go and see the individual house numbers, the addresses, and actually click through it and see all the owners for the individual lots. So I can understand, okay, if I build, 5,000 feet or something, I can understand exactly how many homes I'm going to be passing as part of that. So I can figure out, if I only build, the first quarter of this road, I'm not going to pass very many people. But if I build, all the way down to the end, I'm going to actually pass a lot more homes here on this Waters Road. So what do? I count the homes. I actually go out, I do a lot of drive-by. I study and I figure out who the competitive providers in the area. I look at, is T-Mobile providing their home ISP service in the area? I make a guess of what that sign-up rate is going to look like for the area. And also now everybody has the luck of being able to look at the RDOF maps as well to determine, okay, do I want to invest in this area if I know it's been funded for fiber next year, or in the next couple of years through the RDOF process. And really the important thing is I send letters out to all these prospective customers. Like I said, I pull their names and addresses from the property maps. And I'm sure your town probably has, town or area probably has tax maps or something like that, where you can see what's going on. So I'll go and I'll look at RDOF and I'll see, oh, well, this area, either didn't qualify or nobody bid on it for RDOF, which goes and makes things interesting. So, like any aspiring, business person, I made a quick model to estimate all the costs. I have many people who've come to me, in the past year, and especially in the past couple of weeks, who said, "Hey, I'd really like you to build out service to me," and I need a quick way to figure out, okay, what does it roughly look like to build out service to these areas? And then also, I have a map that I print out on my wall. So I go and the county website lets me export a PDF of an area, and I'll actually go and I'll export all the layers, including which properties have buildings on them. Like I said, I'll export what the road right of way is. And I go and I put that on my wall, and I actually will mark it up, with pen and pencil and Sharpies to just indicate, okay, who's interested. I may write up, right on there, how much they're willing to pay. I also track it in some spreadsheets and other places as well. But that lets me understand, where are the hot spots where there might be some interest and where it might be worthwhile to do, an additional investment to go and expand stuff. So hopefully you can see this fine. This is a screenshot of the spreadsheet that I use to go and figure out, what a project like this costs. So in this case, there's 20 homes. I assumed, 70% of them are going to sign up. And it automatically calculates a nice round number for the customers. I put in, what I expect the ARPU to be on those customers. And this actually factors in the majority of the, at least the mainline cost, as well as what I think I'm going to need for drop fiber going up to the homes to go and build these. I'm going to share this spreadsheet at the end. There was a link in one of the earlier slides, which may not have shown that had the URL, but I have a link to the Google spreadsheet, and hopefully you're able to copy it. If not, you can reach out to me and I'll figure out how to export a copy, or maybe I'll put a raw copy of it in for Excel or something up on the website if that's easier. And with this, you can type in the number of foot underground. You can adjust your labor cost. your permit cost, how many permits you need, whether or not you need an outdoor cabinet, for example, to house equipment because it's not near your head end. And this cabinet, this is a reasonable budgetary number for an outdoor cabinet that has air conditioning, generator inlet, batteries, the heating, air conditioning, like everything you would need to basically be relatively solid. It doesn't include all of the extra stuff, like if you need to pour a pad or get a utility drop or a gas drop. But that's at least what the cabinet cabinet looks like. And you can go in here and adjust how many splice enclosures you need, how many handholds, and the costs and stuff like that. And this is what I use. So to build to these 20 homes, I'm estimating the cost to be about $160,000, which of course is a lot of money. And but because I can tie it into my existing network, the additional cost for me to service these people, when you look at the bandwidth usage of people on fiber, it's really only about, at peak about 20 megabits for many of the people is what you'll see, the Netflix or Hulu or whatever their streaming service kind of peak out at. That doesn't mean they don't have, these larger peaks when they do gaming downloads, or something like that. But, as an average placeholder number, I put in 20 megabits today for that. I offer 3 rate plans as well. They're 65, 75, and 99. Most people, will pick the 75 or the 65 plan. I've got a couple people on the 99 plan because I only have 32 customers online on my current network. But because I can tie it into the existing part, I don't have to build a separate island or stub. I go and I put in a number of, okay, how much do I think that additional bandwidth is potentially going to cost me? So I can factor that in. The numbers may come out a little bit lower, but it's always good to estimate, okay, these people, they're going to use some more bandwidth. I might need to upgrade my transit, my peering, my backhaul, whatever it is. And then, come up with, annual revenue and my years until, the investment pays itself back. In this case, 12 years, that may be longer than I'm willing to invest in something. But maybe there's another neighborhood, another half mile down the road that changes that equation significantly. And like I said, in the case of this project, there's people who put up money up front. And then it looks like Tim may have a question.
How do you incorporate costs for repairs and such? Because we're constantly having to replace drop cables for rodents and things like that. So truck rolls for repairs. Where does that go in the budget?
So I have a different spreadsheet I use for that. I estimate about $200 a month for that in my kind of long-term model. This is kind of just how I budget for an expansion project. But I have $200 a month kind of slotted in there for any of the existing customers, assuming that I'm going to need to pay a contractor or somebody $25 an hour, is kind of what I assume for somebody to go out and touch stuff. Right now, I haven't had any of my drops damaged, so yay me, I guess. I'm sorry you're having that issue.
Well, we have to put squirrel guards up.
Yeah, I'm a little bit curious because all of my stuff is buried. So is that underground or is that on poles?
This is all aerial.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't have any of that factored in, and that's actually, I've got some slides later where I talk about why underground is cheaper than aerial, kind of in the long term, and that's one of the components that come in. So, all right, if Tim, you're done, I can hit a button. And then Chris, you have a question. Maybe you hit raise hand. All right. Well, I'm gonna. Oh,
hey,
okay.
Jared.
Yeah.
I think Dave also is asking a question in the chat.
Oh, yeah. I can't monitor all the stuff. Hey, thanks. 3 plans. Oh, sorry. I do a 50-50. So everything is symmetric. I do a 50, a 250, and a 500 symmetric plan for $65, $75, and $99 a month. And I priced it that way in order to keep the service, I don't want people who are, kind of being a pain for, saying, hey, I don't hit my speeds. So I don't offer a gigabit tier, even though I have the capability to do that. I don't want them to speed test and say, hey, I only get something. The 500 meg service is actually a gigabit service. So that actually works out, I think, relatively well, because you're much easier kind of, under promising and over delivering in that case. All right, if there's no other questions here, I will go on to the next. So yeah, next things that I do when I'm looking at a project is I start to get in touch with people to draw, to get the drawings for my permits. I call my distributors, line up all the materials. So I just met with my Millennium rep about a week or two ago, and I said, hey, I have this project coming up. I gave them all the estimates for when I need the materials and everything. Fiber supplies in some cases are actually relatively limited, especially if you're getting excellent pricing, on either CommScope or Superior Essex for some of those things. So it's important to actually tie up a lot of those things. Right now, I've heard lead times for fiber are out about 22 weeks or so. So you need to go and tie them up quickly. Conduits and handholds are more readily available. I don't do that. And it looks like Josh put a comment in the chat saying that some stuff is out over a year right now. Based on that, I always, when my contractors are out working for me, I always keep a reel or a pallet ahead of the construction crew available, just so that we have the flexibility of, if they've got a good day drilling, that everything is there. Because on an average day, a crew for me was able to get about 800 feet done. They had a couple of good days where they got 1,100 feet done, and I was doing dual conduits. So I was asked to show off my little fiber blower and kind of talk about that. So this is my cheap version of a fiber blower. What you can see here is you can see the the hose. I went to the hardware store, got some galvanized fittings. I used 1.25 inch conduit, and the 1 inch galvanized actually fits nicely right inside the 1.25 inch conduit. And I was able to put this in. I used a plastic end cap on there because I actually, in this case, I blew in some of the 12 strand flat drop cable, because that's what was available and relatively inexpensive. And I didn't need a lot of strand count. Along the way. I actually have dual conduit, 2 conduits were installed by my contractor. If you're outsourcing any of this, absolutely do dual conduits. It's going to future-proof you, and it's going to give you the chance to come back and fix any mistakes you made along the way. Just because it's only about another 60 cents or so a foot to pay the contractor in materials plus labor to put in a second conduit. So you should always be asking, hey, how much for a second or a third conduit, when you're doing this type of work. I kind of put together a little bit of a parts list for this. So after a few times renting the air compressor, and hose, I actually just went and I bought my own hose because they're relatively inexpensive. I put some costs in here for what it is to rent the air compressor. You can go to Grainger and get some of the Chicago fittings and Y fittings. If you don't want to use a 90 like what I did, I've got some Ys and I just haven't swapped out the fittings, on my device. But then I also just used a 1 inch plastic cap on the end to cut out a slot. To do stuff. The other thing that was really important when I was doing this, because this was my first time doing a project, is making sure you have the right lubricant for the conduit. So this blowing lube, I used the Duraline Summer, actually worked really well, and it made everything, go smooth. So your first time blowing fiber into a conduit, you really need to make sure that conduit is clear, because if it's been more than a day, you probably got some condensation or some dirt or rocks that might have gotten into the conduit. So you go and you take the air compressor, you hook it up, You go and you make sure that you've got some place for, stuff on the outlet to go, so you don't fill up your handhole with water. I speak from experience on this. You go and you put the lube into the conduit, and you actually get one of these car wash sponges or a sponge like you would use for grouting tile, and you cut it up and put it in the conduit. You can see in this photo here, the sponge is sitting right there on the ground. So you send the sponge through, make sure everything's clear, nothing's blocking it. You use the sponge to push the lubricant through as well. The other thing is you need to have a really good blowing parachute. I tried to use some of these, these cheaper things that you can buy. I put a link here for this, the one that I got from Millennium. It's a good parachute. It's really long. It fills up well, with air when you've got stuff behind it, and that worked out great. You need to have a bunch of people when you're blowing fiber. You can't really do it, as a single person. So I had one of my friends who owns one of the local wireless ISPs out there, as well as I had my, two of my teenage boys out helping me, get things going. So I added on a conduit tail on the one end, just temporarily to get, once I figured out, oh, hey, if you blow water out, it's going to fill up your handhole. Seems really obvious, but whatever. You want to blow that up on the ground somewhere else when you're clearing it out. You want to have people obviously at both ends, and people to help keep an eye on the cable as it's being blown in, to make sure that that everything's going. So it really takes about 3 or 4 people to do this. So expect to have a day where if you're doing something very guerrilla-ish like me, where you got you and your friends, you've got them all helping you. You want to make sure that you have all of that, around. What else? So when I install customers and I do the drop up to the home, I make sure my installation price covers that initial cost. It looked like Glenn might have a question. Glenn, can you unmute yourself and ask? Or maybe you hit there's a raise hand thing that you hit. I'm gonna lower your hand if you can raise your hand again if you got a question. So what I do, I make sure I recover all of my electronics and the drop cost and the install fee. So if somebody's got a really long driveway, I've got this house that is in the process of being closed on. It's being sold for $1.5 million nearby me. I quoted them $2,500 to run the fiber up to the house. The homeowner there said, great, I'm going to wait for Elon Musk to solve my problem. The house had been on the market for a while, so I wasn't exactly surprised that they didn't immediately sign up, but I emailed the realtor as well and let them know, by the way, there's a handhole right in front of the house. It's going to be really easy to service this house in the future. So let any prospective purchaser know that they can actually get high-speed internet, which was, I think, useful. So, and then I eventually got contacted by both the buying agent and the new homeowner about that. And so I was able to, reuse that same price. I quoted them $2,500 to install it. I should have really charged them more because getting that drop cable up, if I outsource to a contractor, I'm paying $1 a foot to have them install that cable. All right, and Glenn hit the button again. So,
can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, I had a mute problem going on here. Sorry about that, guys. I wanted to raise the issue. I know you went into a lot of depth about blowing fiber and the crew it takes and such. I just want to point out that you can buy conduit with pull cord in it as well. So, you can pull your fiber back through the conduit, especially when you got short runs or stuff without a lot, that's going to take a lot to pull it through or power to push it through. So I just wanted to point that out. Besides blowing for a few pennies extra, you can get conduit with a pull cord in it. So just wanted to point that out. It could be quite well worth it to pull sometimes. Anyway, I just wanted to point out that option. A little bit of gel lube and away she goes.
Excellent. Thanks, Glenn. Yeah, there's we pulled in about a third of it, and had a few problems getting stuff going. And then once we finally got the blowing system down, it went really well, because I actually initially blew in just the El Cheapo blue and white pull string, because and that can work on short distances. And if you have the drop cable, you can actually push that in conduit a couple 100 feet without issues, including around I've got a 90-degree bend where it goes through a farmer's field as it's crossing two roads. It's only about 200-300 feet apart from the two handholds, but you can actually push the flat drop through the conduit, in some cases if the run is short enough. But thanks. So, I have the next slide, which is the obligatory Starlink slide, and asking about space lasers. So we'll move on from that. So as somebody mentioned earlier, underground versus aerial. I'm 100% underground today. I've gotten pricing for aerial. It really can be cost effective if you're going long distances, or if you're in a really dense area. But the pole conditions and the lease agreements and who owns them really matter a lot. You really want to make sure that you're on new green ones. You really don't want to see those old drier ones where you see, you can look at them and you can see they're bending. Whoever owns the pole may ask you to pay to upgrade them. A new pole starts at about $800, and that's for the pole. That doesn't include installation. The other thing is, around here, if you are crossing a road, it requires a permit to cross the road. So it's the same permit cost for me to go underground or overhead. And then you have to worry about, is the pole tall enough? Expect to be at least 18 feet up. And then I was on a call with somebody last night who was telling me about how the local farmers and their combines, will catch the fiber and just chew it up and pull it off the poles as well. So you really need to make sure that you have excellent clearance. Reasons why I didn't go aerial. Even though the estimated cost was lower, there weren't actually contiguous poles for the main route where I needed to tie into where the fiber was. The other thing is you have a lot of liability, both just in direct and indirect liability, going above ground versus underground. You have to worry about things like ice storms up here, snowstorms, just whatever, people, as I mentioned, the combines. I also don't own a bucket truck. I think it would be great to own one for the purposes of, putting up my Christmas lights. But maybe I'll just make friends with somebody who has one to do that. You've got liability issues of maintaining that vehicle, additional vehicles to maintain, commercial driver's licenses and stuff like that. And then if you're going to be touching the poles, you really need to be, you often need to be certified to actually go and touch those poles. And then if there's a pole like out in the back of the field behind somebody's house, that is that contiguous one, and something breaks out there in the middle of the night, in the winter, or during bad weather, the estimates that I got for an emergency restoration were around $8,000 to do that. And so for $8,000, I can build another 1,000 feet of underground, for every time I take an outage. If you have some of that stuff where you're doing it in-house, obviously your costs are going to be lower. But if I outsource that, yeah, my costs are going to be, up to $8,000 every time something happens. And it's really hard to sue a tree. Whereas if an underground contractor hits my stuff, I at least have some hope potentially that they are properly insured and I can recover some money from them. So people asked about owning versus renting equipment, or leasing it. I actually bought an old JT 820 drill. It's great for doing short roads and driveway crossings. It goes 200 feet. The head of it is almost exactly 2 inches. And so 1.25 inch conduit, you can pull back with that. basically in the void of the head without having to do a lot of extra work. You know, I went, I upgraded the wand. You know, I bought it. It came with all the electronics, but I bought a new wand for it earlier this year, just because the newer wand actually worked a lot better than the old one. I still rent an air compressor. I've started kind of looking at whether or not it's worthwhile to buy a used one. I've got mini sneaker and a drop cable plow that I borrow, but I'm looking at the SPX 25, which is around 25 grand, which is probably going to be the next big purchase aside from fiber installation that I'm going to do, just so I don't have to borrow equipment anymore. And somebody commented and said they really love the SPX 25. So the other things to keep in mind, if you're doing it yourself, there's you know, a lot of headache that you have to go through. I watch my contractors have days where they said, you know, they call the owner of the company who I contracted stuff out to, and he said, hey, I'm going to call you back when I'm ready to pay you to install your conduit, because he had some weeks where they didn't get any conduit in at all just because of equipment breakdown and stuff. But the contractors, they get paid per the foot. You know, the price for setting things like handholds, you can either get that included or in some cases expect, you know, at least $100 per handhole that you have put in. The other thing is, if you're going short distances, a lot of the companies will have project minimums where you need to spend $5 grand or something like that for it to be worth them to bring the equipment in. And then in-house, obviously, you have to do a lot more attention because you're looking for all the utility conflicts yourselves. And you really need to check your insurance coverage and what those requirements are for that. I talked with my insurance people, and they said, yeah, it'll be quite a bit more if you're going to build any of the main line yourself. But that, you know, a road crossing or a driveway crossing for a drop, not an issue. I figured insurance, seriously, everyone just call Unitel. There's great people over there. They really understand this. Like I said, the drops versus mainline costs, you know, are different. They also have programs where they can actually insure your outside plant. So in the case that somebody digs it up and isn't insured, they can actually provide you coverage for things like that. You can also insure your aerial plant against damage. So if there's a big ice storm or windstorm that comes through and you have to rebuild a lot of stuff, you can actually purchase insurance for that. One of the other things that's really hard, I think, with a project like this is finding enough internet access. For me, it was, you know, I thought it was going to be easy. I was planning to build up to a corner where there were 7 different service providers up there. There's actually a lot of fiber near me, I found out. It's basically all for cell towers, and almost every single customer I've hooked up has fiber in front of their home already from one of the incumbents or one of the people who does cell tower backhaul. And the big challenge was carriers have these fibers, but they can't actually sell you anything off of them because they're either dedicated for a specific customer or they may have subleases on there or what's known as IRUs, where people can go and lease a strand from, whoever actually owns the fiber, be it, around here, there's a lot of Windstream and Everstream type of fiber. But once you find all the splice locations, you can generally find you find a splice location where you can actually tie in at. In my case, I actually, I found somebody, they were able to meet me, one of the carriers, I'm paying them to do a joint build to me. So I'm actually getting a conduit and they get a conduit, which is actually going to work out well for both of us because we're both going to have opportunity to pick up a number of customers. And one of the other companies, they actually, they took a Slack loop that was already up there and they got the people who owned that fiber to actually add a splice enclosure there. So I could tie in exactly where the Slack loop is. I have a 2 gig commit on a 10 gig port right now. One of the big things when you're buying internet access or the data center access for this is you want to be looking at what what makes financial sense on both sides. A lot of the carriers really have a minimum price that they, they're not going to go, they're not going to sell you a service for less than, $1,200 and $1,500 a month. Just that cost of customer acquisition, it's not worth it to them. And a lot of the salespeople are commissioned based on the commit rate that you sign up for. So it's actually, in your best interest to maybe overbuy your commit rate. That way the sales rep is incentivized to give you a good deal, as opposed to coming back with a burstable rate where they don't get commissioned on it. So there's less of an incentive for them to, make sure that you get a slightly better price. So I was also asked to add some content about data center space. There's a huge number of variables here, whether or not the data center charges you cross-connect fees, whether or not there's entrance fees. So, maybe you're the incumbent and you want to build into, in an area, somebody's built a new data center or something. Some data centers charge you money to bring service into that building. So you may have to have a monthly rent for a conduit to get into there. You have to keep an eye on what your power usage is, what your power fees are, whether or not they charge you extra if you exceed your power, your heat budget for the equipment. There's really too many variables that's almost its own separate presentation, to do that. But once you're in one of those data centers, you can generally get your price per bit starts dropping from, maybe 50 cents or something like that to much lower. And then if you have data center space, you can also start to add additional services, like network video. You can actually host VMs or server infrastructure for customers who have video cameras or something like that. You need to be careful there that they understand exactly what they're buying, that they don't think you're running a security service for them. But you can often say, oh yeah, here, just point your cameras up here. You'll have some on-net traffic for that, but it's at least going back to your own data center space. Just some more talk about transits, and then there's also internet exchange points. You can offload a fair amount of traffic at the exchange points. The CDNs really like that. There's a good time to disclaimer that, once again, I work for Akamai in my day job, but, Akamai, Fastly, Cloudflare, there's the Edgecast, Verizon stuff, the level 3 CDN, Amazon, and, a lot of these companies have their own CDN products. And you can pick them up at some of the exchange points. And so if there's one nearby, it may turn out to be a reasonable thing for you to do. So for network architecture, folks wanted me to share a little bit of stuff here. You really want to create some tight standards about what you're doing if you're getting into fiber. Don't deviate. Coming back to fix it is always going to be more time and effort, and you're going to have to interrupt that service if you have to, cut that fiber and resplice it. I have a lot of cleaning up to do because I built regular Ethernet, active Ethernet solution to my neighbors. And now that I'm doing PON, I have to go in and either figure out how I'm going to clean all that up. I've got this really, really messy splice enclosure that would totally make an excellent photo of what not to do as I was learning. I really recommend using a good quality splice enclosure like the CommScope ones. Just as an example, I really like the CommScope enclosures. They're well designed, and it's really easy to build them correctly, as opposed to just trying to use some of the FiberStore ones, which is where I started trying to save an extra $50 here and there, but it's going to cost me $200, $500 worth of time to go back and fix it later. So it's really not going to work out well for me. I use distributed splitters out in the field. I go and I cascade some of them. My target is really to get a maximum of 32 customers per segment. I only have 22 customers on PON right now who are using a bunch of different ports on my OLT. But I also have, and my furthest customer is, I think, 4.5 or 5 kilometers out right now. But I have some of the customers are close enough that I have to add attenuators to pad the signal because it's getting too hot because they're so close. And I really need to separate them off and probably put a splitter in my basement or at my head end to go and separately just pad out those people where they're really close, as opposed to people who are much further away. Like I mentioned, I still have customers on active Ethernet. I'm looking at transitioning them to PON. In my case, that's not going to get me any power savings because they're actually just terminated on the main router that connects to my upstream. My head end, it uses about 500 watts of power, and right now I'm just using regular consumer grade UPSs, and I'm looking to transition to something else. And then I also have a 22 kilowatt backup generator for my house that has ATS built in, and it's been interesting to watch the different power failures my customers have downstream, because you'll see there's actually 3 different power grids just in a 2-mile radius, really almost a 1-mile radius of my house that have outages. I'm juggling this day job versus night job. The running the ISP is my night job. It can be hard sometimes when I've got vendors who I'm trying to buy from, who are the sales reps call me in the middle of the day, maybe while I'm on other conference calls. The nice thing is customers usually want evening visits anyways, so I'm able to do a lot of that. I haven't had any customers go down for any fiber failures. I can't remember who mentioned squirrels chewing their aerial fiber. Except for the ones that were self-inflicted. When you're in there touching something, it's always possible that you're going to go and impact an existing customer. And then really the expansion projects take up most of my time. With the exception of customers who are complaining about the Wi-Fi coverage in their house. And I'm spending a little bit of time on those. I need to fully outsource those to somebody who can just set up an Arrow system for them. So with that, I'm going to open it up for any questions that people have. So hopefully there's some questions. I'm expecting a lot.
Not sure if you can hear me, but quick question I had was how you did your active Ethernet near your local neighbors. I know it's a little off topic.
Yeah, so I purchased an Arista 7050. There's a 52 port SFP Plus version, and then I have all the customers in a VLAN. And so I do that, and then they can plug in stuff and then configure DHCP forwarding to my DHCP server. And then did that answer your question?
And then at the customer side, do you have like a converter back to Ethernet, or how do you?
Yeah, I thought I included a slide on this. I used the MikroTik RB FTC11, which is basically a SFP to Ethernet adapter thing. It's actually designed for being outdoors, which is really nice. And so I use that plus the Ubiquiti PON UF Instant as well for the PON customers. So I'm using the same media converter, whether or not they're on Ethernet or on PON. And then I just swap the SFP to either be the Ethernet one or the PON one based upon the use case. But I haven't had any of the media converters or optics fail yet. Aside from I had one bad Ubiquiti optic, which I RMA'd. It was just, it synced up fine on the line side, but for some reason it didn't give it didn't give a link on the Ethernet side of the SFP. So I could manage the SFP, but it just, there's no Ethernet on the other side. And then it looks like, I think Mike is next because he raised his hand.
I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the process of becoming an ISP in your state and regulatory right-of-way, things of that nature.
Sure. Around here, it actually was was relatively easy. And thanks to the same Facebook groups I think most of you got in through, I found other people in Michigan who had done this already. And I talked to them, and they gave me a referral to a lawyer in our state capital in Lansing, who does these things. And so I was able to get the regulatory filings done for only $1,000. I never even talked to the lawyer on the phone. We only communicated over email, and I sent them a check out of my bill payment system to go and get set up. That got me the tariff written up that I needed in order to do things. And then it also, there's a few extra hoops to jump through. In Michigan, there's something called the ITSP registry, which all wireless and fixed providers are supposed to be on as well. There's a list for that, which is everybody who basically, it's registering to receive the consumer complaints when they complain to the state about you. And so you need to be on both of those lists and stuff. So that was the big thing I had to do, because they wouldn't approve my permit until I was published on the state list. And it took a couple rounds to get the state to get me posted on the list of telecommunication companies. All right, and it looks like I think I'm done with you, Mike. And then is it Jermaine?
Yes.
How are you doing?
Pretty good. Hey, so just to piggyback off of that question, so are you established as a CLEC?
No, I'm not. I am what's called a CAP, or a competitive access provider in Michigan, which was the easiest way to get on the list such that I could go and permit the right of way. So once you're on that list, they're able to go and basically they look on the list, see that my company name is there, that I have the right contacts, and then from there are able to then say, okay, you're there. I remember an angry phone call I got from them in the permitting process where they're like, well, you're on the list, we have to issue you a permit. When we were having a discussion about which side of the road I had to be on, because there was a swampy area that we had to cross.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Keith asked kind of a follow-up question in the chat. Yes, the cap was required, but I also had to do the ITSP as well. They wouldn't actually publish. So the dependency was they hadn't ever approved my ITSP application, which is why I didn't show up on the list. So I had to get somebody to manually approve my ITSP registration. The other thing is the state is a little bit unhappy that I'm a single person telephone company. They want me to have a backup person listed in case I'm not around, in case I'm not around to receive complaints or something. So I had to do the CAP plus the ITSP in order to get to be published on the list. And then I'm going to try and go through the chat and find the comments. David Anderson asked about what PON equipment I'm using. I'm currently using the Ubiquiti, the UF8, the OLT8 plus the UF instance. I'm looking to switch to starting to use the locos, because the UF instant has some odd behavior around the rate limiting with some of the customers. That's actually why my higher speed tiers are not rate limited. It was just easier to turn it off, just because I know they weren't going to suck up all my bandwidth anyways. Whereas I know like the little SFP module doesn't. There's somebody who makes his website is thefiberbox.net. And that's a nice little enclosure for that actually can hold the little Ubiquiti hockey puck. And you can actually bring the drop cable into it. It's got nice clamps for that, and you can just splice on a pigtail. You don't have to go through something else. Where right now I'm coming into two different boxes. I've got the MikroTik media converter, and then I have a splice enclosure I have a splice enclosure that I also use side by side, and then I use a fiber jumper to go between them. And then Daryl asked about drops to the user. So I use a flat drop cable, and I just bury that directly up. Whenever I'm crossing a road or a driveway, I always run a conduit, except for recently I've started to not, like I've done one or two where I haven't done that just because it's in a weird location and it was easier to not, pull a conduit back, because you end up with with a 2-inch drill head, you end up with a large enough void that I could actually just push through the drop cable through that void. And I'm just kind of seeing if in a couple trial locations, if not having a conduit there will be okay for the road crossings. I think it will be. Do you have anything else, Daryl? Okay, thanks. Keith asked about maintenance issues with buying an old drill. Yeah, let me tell you about that. Ditch Witch wants to charge a lot of money for some of the replacement parts, and it turns out a lot of the parts are things where you can actually get them from Grainger, especially for the hydraulic and pneumatic types of parts. Find out where the farmers get their hydraulic hoses and stuff. We've got a place just 2 miles up the road where I can get hoses replaced, when there's issues with that. I think for my case, I really enjoy having the drill because it lets me do some things that I wouldn't normally be able to do. I didn't spend a lot of money on it. Like I said, I spent like $8,500 on the drill plus a little bit more to upgrade some of the electronics. I could have built, another, for 10 grand, I could have built, another, probably quarter mile of fiber instead of having the drill. But at the same time, I think it worked out well for me having that, because it's allowed me to do some other things. I actually ran a water line in my yard when I was originally kind of trying out the drill and figuring out how to operate it. So it gave me a chance to figure out how to run it and stuff like that. So that, whenever you own a piece of equipment, it's always, there's always some upsides to that as well. And then Ryan is asking, how many customers per day can I add to my network with my current resources? Not a lot. I mean, it's me and I have a day job. So it takes me around, depending on the complexity, it takes me about 8 hours to hook up every customer, from burying the main line, the drop or whatever, up to, up to the home, the house, doing the split. If I need to build a new splice enclosure, if I need to go and, do the termination at the house plus running Cat5 into the house and everything, it's really, sort of in the 4 to 8 hours per customer range. Sometimes it can go faster, but it really depends on the environment. I've had some customers where they've just poked out an Ethernet cable for me and handed it out the window, and I crimped on connectors for them, and that worked out relatively well. So if they're able to do some of that work and make it easier for you, that's something I give them a discount on the installation if they make my life easier like that. Chris asked for a link to the stuff. I put that in the chat. I think I already answered Keith's question about the cap. Yeah, John is asking a great question about what's my backup plan since I'm a one-man telephone company. Yes, the local WISP guy, I've helped him for about 10 years. I have keys to the base of his tower and help him out. At times, I actually have one of the AirFiber 60s sitting behind me from the great deal Ubiquiti did recently, because he actually buys internet access from me now. So we're going to mount an AirFiber 60 up on my roof. He's got access to a lot of the equipment. But I actually went to Florida a couple weeks ago, just before Christmas, and the fiber network is reliable enough. I didn't even think that much about it. because I had about 4 months of experience running it. So, I know a lot of people say, hey, if you've been doing WISP for a while, there's a lot of stuff to be worried about. With the fiber stuff, it really just is that much more reliable. David Anderson, I'm going to skip to his question real quick. Everybody gets a public IP. Mark Rogers is asking, if my main line is on the east side of the road, which is what my county asks me to do, and I have 4 houses on the west side, do I run all 4 drops under the road? What I've done is I have my contractor bore a conduit across the road, and I actually put a pedestal on the other side, depending on the distance. And then I'll just run the drops to the pedestal. I charge customer. So Chris Westcott is asking what I charge to install. I charge $199 to install, unless it's done as the same time as the mainline build, and then I discount it just because having the construction crew out there already makes a difference. And I think that's all the questions. Actually, let me volunteer something as well. I've had 2 customers pay the install fee and not sign up for service, just because I'm out there with the directional drill running stuff for drops. And I actually have a 3rd one who's about to hook up in a similar situation. When you're going by these homes, consider what it's going to take to wire up all of them, where your splice points are going to be, and everything. And if the homeowner will let you pre-run the fiber up to the home while you're already out there with the machines bearing drops or something, absolutely take advantage of that situation, because it's going to save you time in the future. Brandon's asking, what do I think the best network design is? If it's, I guess, GPON or active Ethernet. I really think for my case it's GPON, because I'm just going to consumers, and you can take advantage of the fact that most homes aren't going to, even if they're pulling, if I have 2 homes on the same segment pulling 2 gig, each one pulling a gig, that it's not going to saturate the PON. That really works out. I have a few customers that I've seen, pulling 500 meg plus, who subscribe to that tier of service. That really, it brings me joy when I see them do that, because they'll do that for a period of time and then it just disappears, because they're able to do that quickly. Whereas if you're on a wireless network, I used to live behind the wireless ISP for a number of years. It would have taken, hours on end. And so, the ability to see that difference in that download time and basically getting them off the network quickly, is the way I think about it, is get that download out of the way quickly and then move on to the next thing. Really makes a big difference. And if you're being billed at a 95th percentile, it doesn't impact your 95th percentile graphs. So I'll have spikes up to 700, 800 megabits, but my 95th percentile is about 150 megs right now. And that includes the WISP plus my customers. And the WISP has probably, I think, 30 or 40 customers routed through me as well. And I don't know, are there any other questions? Roger.
Hello. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, so if you're running fiber, say a kilometer down the road, and it's your big main line, so you've got 100 plus count fiber, but you're only passing 4 homes, then do you also run like a 12 count fiber with, and how do you split off? Because you can pay a lot for fiber enclosures for your main line, right? So are there like cheap ones for low count fiber?
Yeah, I mean, there are different ones. I recommend not going any smaller than the CommScope 450B. That can hold up to 96 splices in it, and you can have multiple cables coming into it. There's different enclosures like the Coyote ones, and other things where you can buy where they're pre-built or pre-terminated with all of the with a splitter inside of it. But at least for what I'm doing, I go down the road. Like I said, today, everything I have is a 12 count flat drop cable, even though it's in conduit. And with that, I made the mistake once of trying to mid-span that, with the tools, and it's mid-spanning, at least for me, is really hard. It was the first time I did it. I really wish I had not tried to mid-span that, in hindsight. And I just had kind of planned to take a fiber outage, or built it correctly the first time and put a splice enclosure there the first time when I was running the fiber through there, as opposed to something else. But the decision of where to place the splice points, I think, that somewhat depends on where it lives in your network topology and what you're planning to do in the future. So if you're planning on selling to, if you know that somebody's going to build like a microcell tower or something down there, if you know there's a cell tower or something where you might want to sell them fiber access, the requirements on that might be very different than, for what you're doing, if you're doing mostly, enterprise or consumer access. So, but I ran 2 conduits, so I can always blow in or pull in a second cable into the other conduit and then take the 12 count and cut it out. And Josh has a helpful comment he put in the chat about Millennium Geospatial actually does contracting on this type of stuff. So you may be worthwhile for you to talk to them as well if you're in the US. And then Keith Merrifield asked about the best resources for finding usable fiber meet points. I tried using things like Fiber Locator and Infrapedia. There's a couple of these websites that have that type of stuff. I really found it difficult for that to be accurate to who would sell me access there, because just because they have access there, that doesn't mean they will sell it there, which was a big problem for me. Because in my day job, I have relationships with a lot of the carriers, and so I asked them where they could sell me fiber access at, and it turned out that a lot of the fiber, they couldn't actually sell me access on it unless I just wanted to lease dark strands from them. And even with that, they were like, oh, well, you have to tie in at our nearest splice point, which is a mile west or a mile east. So I'd have had another mile of build on top of everything else to go and reach those locations. So I really found driving around, looking at the fiber, and then calling, going and calling all the companies, including the local ones, and trying to figure out who they all are, the local regional providers, and the non-incumbent ones, because at least around here, we've got a number of those. We have ACDNet, 123Net here in Michigan, amongst others, and they were able to get access into, either the Windstream or Everstream fibers that they lease from others, and get me access. Matt Martin is asking, what's my thought process on getting fiber count versus planned customers? Do you want to come off mute and clarify what you're asking there? I'm trying to decipher it.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Hey, I just didn't know what was your process on how to determine what kind of fiber count you needed versus your potential area.
Yeah, that's, I looked at how many customers were along the road. So there's between me and where I tie into my ISP, there's about 18 homes. And so I knew that if I needed to, I could squeeze in 1 or 2 splitters and just home run the rest of the strands back to my house. Originally, I actually bought a reel, and I still have it unused, just like the person who I bought it from. I bought a reel of 216 count fiber, which I could put in the conduit as well. So I have that sitting here in my yard. I need to actually move it up to my storage location. And because originally I was just like, oh, I'm just going to active Ethernet all these customers back to my house and call it good. But I don't own a ribbon splicer, and it's a ribbon cable. And I didn't want to buy one just because I'm being cheap. That's, I know I'm going to need to get a ribbon splicer at some point, but I'm kind of holding that cable in reserve for later. And so I looked at, there's 18 homes that I passed along the way. And I knew that if I carve out, 2 or 4 strands for my ISP, like for tying into the ISP, that still left enough strands that I could put in a couple pond splitters and hook people up. So that's my current strategy on the 12 count. I do have some 48 count that I'm going to that I started to run on a different conduit section, which is nice because that has a buffer tube that has 12 fibers per inside of it. I got it because of some complicated ordering snafu that happened. And I actually am going to use probably that or some 96 count for everything else in the future that I'm doing.
Quick question. Did you go the DIA route or did you do the transport peering route?
I went the DIA. So I did both. So I bought DIA from ACDNet, and from 123net, I have a EPL back to their data center, and then I have DIA in the data center plus a connection to the Detroit IX. And I should say, disclaimer, I'm now on the Detroit IX board. But if you're in Michigan, you should totally come hook up at the Detroit IX because the ports, at least right now, are still free. So you can get a 10 gig or 100 gig into the IX for, if you're in one of the data centers. That's on net. And if you're there, I'll configure the BGP peering with Akamai for you. You just send me a Facebook message. And no, I can't help you with footlocker problems. Dave Purdy's asking the biggest challenge or bottleneck. It's money. It's expensive to do. It's well worth it, but you have to get people. You have to convince people to part with money to do things or something else. 80% of it is this outsourced labor cost. Everything else, the cost of the fiber, you're talking about less than $1 a foot for that, less than $1 a foot for conduit, less than, everything else. The contractor labor is $7 a foot. You've got another $1 a foot in engineering plus surveying work and stuff, because around here they want you to survey the right of way if you're installing in it to make sure that you know where that is. So that adds up. That's probably 5 to 10% of the cost right there is getting all the drawings and surveying. 80% of it's labor, and the last 10% is actually the fiber stuff. The fiber stuff is the cheap part. Daryl is asking anything else I wish I'd known before I started buying fiber. Probably just be mindful of keeping how you're going to keep good documentation of it. Right now, I'm still, and if Glenn's still here, he's going to yell at me. I'm still using a Google spreadsheet to keep track of it. It doesn't really scale anymore. That's something I need to go and fix, is that I really don't have as good records there as I really wish that as I wish I had. For the first part, I definitely had that, but as I started hooking up a couple of these last customers, I don't have as good of records just because I was trying to hurry through it, especially as weather got bad. I wasn't, taking photos and keeping as good of notes and updating the spreadsheet from my phone the way I had with the first 20 customers. So Brad is asking about the staking thing. So, somebody booted up Windows, I guess.
Reports.
All right.
After weeks of...
Okay. Sylvia muted before I could get to it. So staking, it's basically finding the property corners and the location of the right-of-way. So they wanted stakes posted every about 100 feet along the project, along the length of the project, to show where the property lines were. So where each side of the road was, where the county's responsibility was. Because you'll hear people say the term center line of the road. The road may not be in the center of the right-of-way. And there's some of the roads where there's actually legally no shoulder for the right-of-way. In my case, I have a road that is almost entirely offset to the side. And so we actually put the conduit in what we thought was the farmer's field behind a row of trees. It turns out we're not still where we put it. We're still 9 feet off of the back of the right-of-way. We were supposed to be in the back foot of the right-of-way. We're actually 9 feet off where we installed it, just because the road is not the center, is not in the center of where it was. So the guys went and they wheeled it off. They went and they talked to the farmer out there and talked to me, and they put it behind the line of trees. And then the county was like, "Oh, that looks fine, except where's your stakes?" And once we got the stakes dropped in, it was 9 feet off. And so you want to make sure that you're not 9 feet on somebody's private property, because there's a row of trees and it's a dirt road. There is, less concern about it, but it's possible that they would have made us replace that section of conduit, or uninstall it and reinstall it, which would have been a whole special experience. So you want to be mindful of that. Tyler's asking about kind of my growing plans, I'll say generically. So I'll start with the locating question. So right now today, I do all the locates. So when you call 811 or fill out the form, in Michigan, we call it MISDIG. When you do that, I actually get notified. It dings on my phone. And so I actually go out and I do all the locates and do all the responses for that. That doesn't take a lot of time because for the most part, you can just check it once a day. But I have special rules in Gmail for any of the emergency or the retransmit type of tickets, which usually show up either after a storm or if somebody has like their septic system failed or something. I am looking to contract out more of the installation activities. Another wireless ISP that's probably 20, 30 minutes away from me. They actually have done a deal with a neighborhood where they beamed wireless into that neighborhood and then ran fiber within it. So everybody could have high-speed access in that neighborhood, and the HOA actually paid to have that installed. And that person, he also has a day job. They're set up as a wireless cooperative, and they were able to outsource all of that. And they have a technician who they taught how to do the fiber splicing as well. in order to tie everything in. And so he did all the fiber splicing at the home, but they outsourced all the burying of the drops and the main line. And they did good work for basically the same cost that it cost me to do it. So I'm probably going to do that exact same thing in the future. All right. Unless there's any other questions in the next minute or two, thank you for everyone for coming. I hope you got all your questions answered and stuff. If you haven't talked to Glenn, you should definitely talk to Glenn about his Map It Right service that he has as well. That can help you with getting the permits and the staking sheets and do some of that, as well as keeping fiber records. Thank you all for coming, and I'm happy to share what I learned. So.
Thanks for putting it on, bud.
Hey, no problem. I figured I'd try and give back to the community. A lot of people in the group have helped me, and so I want to make sure that I give back. And with that, I'm going to hit stop recording.